Now we're in stage 10, custom shape and a pergola stage. And we are going to draw a custom shape, and we're going to draw a pergola. And we are going to take advantage of a very unique feature to custom shapes. What's unique about custom shapes is that they conform with other shapes. You can elevate custom shapes, and you can rotate custom shapes in 3 different directions in 3D. So that's very unique. To take advantage of that, we are going to zoom in to the spa area. Remember that we have a slight issue in our terrain behind this planter. Where that raised deck sort of intersected with the slope, we've got this section where we should have exposed dirt, but we've got kind of a hardscape material that's randomly applied by the system. I want to cover that up. Just like in real life, that space would need something to retain that terrain. And custom shapes is one of the few shapes where you can draw a shape flat in 2D, rotate it upright in 3D, and that gives us an opportunity to draw things that have a curved top or edge to them. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw this flat in 2D and rotate it upright in 3D. So I'll start with my line tool. I'm going to go over to my tools and left click on my line tool, and I'm going to go to the top left hand corner of the hardscape behind my spa. Left click on that corner and come to the right 16 feet even. Then go over and activate your arc tool. Bring your radius guide so that it's coming back in the same direction that you came from. And when your cursor gets to the midpoint, that hollow blue point, you'll have a radius of 8 feet, and your radius will align with the beginning point of that 16-foot line segment. And that's exactly what we want. I'm going to left click to lock that in, and then I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to actually draw the arc. So I just locked in the radius. Now I have to draw the arc back counterclockwise until I get to the point where I started. Left click, and I have this curved shape. When you look over at your custom shape and pergola options, you have the option to choose shape or pergola. We definitely want this to be a shape, so I'm going to click on shape, and the height technically has already been established, because when you think about the fact that we're going to rotate this upright in 3D, when you think about it that way, this 8-foot radius technically is going to be the height of this shape. This shape's going to be 8 feet high in structural height. So really what I'm applying right now is the width, the thickness. And I want the thickness of this little retaining wall to be 1 foot 0 inches. Okay, now I'm going to go down to my object settings, and I'm going to set this object up in elevation. And so I want control over the elevation. Right now my auto elevation is on. And I'm going to turn it off, and as soon as I turn it off, see how that value box kind of brightens and allows me to type in a value or enter a value. I'm going to left click on the up arrow and change 0 feet to 5 feet 0 inches. So it's elevated 5 feet 0 inches. Basically, I want it up high enough so that I can work with it. Originally, the elevation function of the program didn't really know. This is a custom shape. It has no default. It doesn't know exactly where it's supposed to be elevated to. So I'm going to manually kind of move that up so that when I go into 3D, it's going to be up kind of above that slope so I can work with it. I'm going to leave my shape selected in 2D and go into 3D. Kind of zoom out. There's my custom shape right up where I elevated it to, and it was selected in 2D, so it's selected in 3D. If yours isn't selected, you can double left click on it to select it. But if it's selected in 3D, then you've got the gizmo. You can move custom shapes with the gizmo, and not only can you move them, you can rotate them and you can scale them. Take a look at your toolbar. See which tools are highlighted. Move, rotate, and scale. All 3 of those functions can be applied to the gizmo. I'm going to left click on the rotate function, and the gizmo's appearance is going to change. It's changing to kind of little circular arrows instead of straight arrows. And what I typically do if something is horizontal and I want to rotate it upright, vertically, what I'll do is I'll kind of give myself this profile perspective like this. And that really gives me a better idea of which arrow is going to be the best choice, and that's going to be the red arrow. I'm going to take my cursor over that red arrow, and look, see, when I point my cursor over the red arrow, when I'm in exactly the right spot, two things happen. One is that it highlights a brighter color. The other one is that I see a little kind of similar icon on my cursor. Now all I have to do is hold down my left mouse button and make a big circle, rotating that counterclockwise, making it go straight up. Now I need to move it so that it's behind the planter or in between the planter and that terrain. So I'm going to change from the rotate mode to the move mode. I'm going to go over to my tools, left click on the move tool, and use the blue arrow to move that shape forward. To get rid of the gizmo, I just click on the circle with the line through it at the top of the screen, and it looks like I've got some kind of marble material. I can change that when I get into the materials phase of the program. We'll go back into 2D to create our pergola. We'll draw our pergola over the wooden deck on the right side of the project. I'll zoom in, pan over, activate my line tool. All I have to do is draw the size of the pergola that I want. I'm going to start drawing at the top right hand corner of the house. I'm going to left click there and come up 16 feet even. Come to the left 20 feet even. Down 16 feet even. And then back over to the right 20 feet, or just press enter to auto close. Go over to your custom shape and pergola options, and this time click on pergola instead of shape. When you click on pergola, you have pergola options. We want the height of our pergola to be 10 feet 0 inches. Any other options that you want to change, you can either do in 2D or in 3D. Let's go to 3D to see what our pergola looks like. When we go into 3D, we can rotate around or navigate so that we can see our pergola over the wooden deck. And just like the wooden deck, because the pergola was selected in 2D, it is currently selected in 3D, so we can actually make changes. That's when we see that white gizmo. Means I can't really move anything, but it is currently selected. So I can use my diagram in my panel menu and select the different components or sections that I want to work with. So for example, if you go over to your diagram and you have your cursor over your columns, you can left click on them and you can see all of your column options. We want square columns. Let's say that we want the spacing to be 16 feet instead of 10 feet. So I'm going to left click on the up arrow and change that spacing. And instead of the spacing that I have, I'm going to change it to 1 foot 0 inches. Makes a big difference. Now go up to the diagram and click on the rafters. You can rotate the framing, you can turn the rafters off. Let's see, the spacing of the rafter, I'm going to change that to 2 feet 0 inches. So you can customize these pergolas to make them look exactly like you want them to look. You can even change the profile of those rafters. I'm kind of zooming in closely. See the profile here at the end of the rafter? If I click on the profile option, my library is going to open and I can double click on other types of profiles. I'll go ahead and close my library. And we're finished with pergolas, so we'll go back in to 2D. And move on to the next stage. And that is going to take us to the materials phase of the program. And we're going to be in 3D for this. There's really no reason to go into 2D. All of the work that we're going to do here is going to be in 3D. So I'm going to kind of zoom out and assess the different materials that I have and decide what shapes I want to change the material on. We'll be selecting objects and applying material through the material library. So let me begin by explaining how this library is organized. All of your materials are here, from brick down to wood. So from brick down to wood, those are the darker blue. From brick down to wood, you have your generic materials. Then from artistic pavers down to wet edge, you have our manufacturers or vendor partner materials. And so that's really nice because it gives you a lot of extra materials to work with. Of course, anytime you see the green circle with the exclamation mark in the middle, that means that a new material was released in the last update. So that's good. That means we've got a lot of new materials for you here. The number on the right side of the title bar of the material is the number of materials and samples in that category. If you left click on the white arrow, you'll see subcategories, and so you can kind of itemize what it is that you're looking for, and then you can close or collapse that list back up when you're finished with it. And it's a good idea to do that. It's a good habit to get into, because otherwise if you keep a lot of things open, you're going to be doing a lot of scrolling. There's a search tab at the top. If you go down at the very bottom, you're going to see that there's an option to open up a library of just currently used materials. Great for matching purposes. Favorites is where you can put a gold star on the thumbnail and mark that as one of your favorites. So a copy of that material goes into this library, and that's great because you're going to have your go-to materials. And then here's a history of recently used materials. Over on the right side in your panel menu, the panel menu has changed a lot. There are not many tools here, just a move tool, and really, you could go back into 2D and move something if you needed to, but typically you're just applying materials. If you go down to the material options, here you have quick selection. This is a way to very quickly select like objects. So for example, if you left click on hardscape, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I bring my cursor over, I see that the surface or top of all of my hardscapes are currently selected, and that's great because that is, it's very likely that I'm going to put all of the same material on those surfaces. Now I can go over to my library, and as soon as my cursor kind of moves from the screen view or the plan view into these panels on the sides, that red highlighting goes away, and it doesn't mean that they're not still selected. Those items are still selected, but I want to be able to see what the material looks like without that red highlighting. If you wanted to, for example, put a stamped concrete on, you would go to the concrete category, left click on the drop down list, and look for the subcategory called stamped concrete. You're going to left click, and it's going to load up every sample, every color, every pattern of stamped concrete. Notice that there's a gray star at the top right hand corner of each one of those thumbnails. You can left click on those stars if those are materials that you commonly use, and make them one of your favorites. That's how you add that to your favorites library. It's a really, really great feature because you're going to have your go-to materials, as I said before. So when you're ready to apply the material, you can either left click on the material, go to the bottom of your thumbnail pane and click on Apply Material, or you can just double click right on top of the thumbnail, which is a little bit faster and easier. And once you're finished, and you've chosen the material that you want to apply, You can clear and close your library. Good habit to get into. I'm going to uncheck stamped concrete. I'm going to close the drop-down list, and I'm going to move on to my next object that I want to apply material to. Oh, I have to delete that. I have to completely redo that too. I have to completely redo that too. Okay. So, materials. Tootie, we are going to save our materials that you commonly use and make them one of your favorites. That's okay. And this needs to have, I would like for that to have marble on it too. Okay, so I've deleted that, right? No, it's not. Okay, that's this and this. Select this, and then you get to apply this. Tootie, we are going to save our materials that you commonly use and make them one of your favorites. That's how you add that to your favorites library. It's a really, really great feature because you're going to have your go-to materials, as I said before. So when you're ready to apply the material, you can either select it and left click on Apply Material, or you can double click on any of the thumbnail images and it will apply the material that way too, which is a little bit faster and easier. When you're finished, you can uncheck your category or your subcategory, close your drop-down list, and now your library is back intact. Over in your materials options in your panel menu, past the quick selection or below the quick selection, you'll see material manipulation. And you've got scale and rotate. That's referring to material. So if I have something selected independently, or if I have it selected through quick selection, I can scale and rotate that. Scale means I can left click on this bar and slide it to the right and make it larger, left make it smaller. The pattern kind of increases or decreases. Rotating changes the orientation, so it can change it and make it go a different direction. You can move the material. If you left click on move material, you can pan that material. That might come in handy. You can select matching. You can import an image of a material, and then you can reset the material back to its original material, back to its original look. Now below that you have the color wheel. It's where you could select an object and literally change the color, or you can click on the HSV option and you can see that the color's kind of broken down here. And if you just wanted to make something darker or lighter, not necessarily change the color, this is brightness bar is an option here. You just left click on the bar and make it lighter, smaller. If you want to reset the material back to its original material, you just left click on reset material. So I've covered the basics of material application and I'm ready to save my work and move on to the next stage. Go to the top left hand corner and left click on the disk icon, then left click on the next stage button, and we will be in stage 12, plants and trees. You can technically insert your plants in 3D, but I prefer to insert them in 2D and then do all my tweaking and repositioning if I need any done in 3D. So I'm going to go back into 2D. And when I make the transition from the design sort of process into the accessorizing process where we're landscaping and staging, I like to make some changes. I like to go to my snaps and constraints and turn my grid snap off. I want relief from the grid when I'm working with shapes, and that way I can move them freely in the space. Then in my angle snaps, I want my angle snap set to none instead of relative, and that way I can rotate my shapes freely. Anything that I'm rotating, like furniture or plants or trees, I can rotate them to any angle, any degree. And the other thing I do is I look at my panel menu and I check my object settings to make sure that my auto elevation is on. If I've moved anything up or down with the gizmo, then that auto elevation will be turned off. And I want auto elevation on because I'm going to be putting things in my space and I want them to go down on the ground. And so I turn my auto elevation back on. Now I'm going to look over at my library and I'm going to see that I have lots of different plants and trees and shrubs and ground cover and things to choose from. But if I want to do a search, a fast way to search for something is up at the top. I'm going to left click and I am going to type in that little search window, crepe, for crepe myrtle. I want to put some crepe myrtles in this space, but I'm not sure where they are. So if I just type in crepe and I left click on the magnifying glass icon, it's going to pull up all of the crepe myrtles for me. Now at the very bottom of the thumbnail pane, we have an option to increase our thumbnail size. I do this when I get into plants and trees, and sometimes some of the other stages as well, but especially plants and trees, because if I want to be able to see all of the labels and see the plants and trees more clearly, I just go to that thumbnail size slider, left click on the bar, and drag it over to the right, and then it's a little bit easier to see and read what's there. Before we insert the crepe myrtle that we choose, I want to make sure that my settings are correct for whether or not I'm going to see a picture of a crepe myrtle as I insert it, or a symbol of a crepe myrtle. It's just going to be a personal preference. In fact, there are a few settings we can look at. If you go to the top left-hand corner of your screen, far as you can go in the top left-hand corner, look for the Pool Studio icon. It's kind of a blue and white diamond. Left click on that. That's your application button. And if you go down the list, look for the option that says configuration. Left click on that. Your configuration window is going to open up, and you have tabs across the top that you can choose from. Kind of internal settings, if you will, that you can look at. I would suggest, maybe when you have a little spare time going through some of these. We're just going to look at the library option right now. Now, show symbols in library should have a red X. Everything else should be a green check mark. Okay, so those are the options that you want checked. And the reason why show symbols in library should have a red X is because we want to see pictures in our library. The only time that I would need or want to see symbols is if I wanted to change a symbol. And right now we're not interested in that, so we want to see pictures. Probably most of the time that's true. Default new landscaping to symbols. When we insert our tree, we're going to see symbols on our grid. If we turn that off, we see pictures. Default new item animations on is great because our animated items are really realistic looking. Default new landscaping animations on just kind of creates a little breeze going through our trees and shrubs and plants. It's very subtle, very natural looking. Auto open library is a great feature. Random scale and random rotate rock works great. Auto favorite library items, why not? And if you wanted to clear your new item notification and remove all of the green circles, letting you know that you've got the new items from an update, you can clear those. So if you've made any changes here, go down to the bottom right-hand corner and apply those changes, and then click OK. You've applied those changes. Now I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose whichever crepe myrtle I want, and I'm going to insert a few of them across that planter along that back wall. So I'm going to go with the crepe myrtle Acoma. So I'm selecting that one. Then I'm going to go down to insert multiple. That's right next to insert one. It's the insert that has the two arrows beside it. And we'll talk about how that works. When you bring your cursor over, you're going to have the symbol of a tree. Left click and drop it in. And the system's going to provide another one for you, and it's going to continue to do that until you don't want any more of whatever it is that you're inserting. All you have to do to dismiss the last one is right click. Just right click to get rid of it. So you just kind of keep clicking and inserting until you are finished, and then you right click and you'll have what you need. Take a look at that in 3D. So now we're in 3D and we can see our crepe myrtles. If we want to move our crepe myrtles, we can double click, use the gizmo. Either the green or the red arrow is a better choice here. If you just left click and move those up or down, further away from the wall, wherever you want to place them. Probably don't need to use the blue arrow. That's going to move them up or down, and that'll throw off the auto elevation. So I'm just double clicking and moving my shapes where I want them to go. The gizmo can become a scale tool. So if you look at a plant or a tree and you notice that it's too big or too small, or you'd like it to be a little smaller, let's say it's too big, you can actually turn your gizmo into a scaling function. If you go over to your tools, you have your move, rotate, scale. I'm going to left click on scale. We haven't worked with that yet. take that over the top of your gizmo, and you're going to see a couple of little white triangles. What you do next is you hold down your left mouse button and move your mouse forward or backward, and you can actually make that larger or smaller. Go back to the Move tool and continue moving your shapes if you need to. One thing you'll probably notice too as I'm working, it's already happened a couple of times as I've kind of rotated around to see what my trees look like, and I'm battling this house quite a bit. That's when hide and unhide really comes in handy, because you know what I'm going to be doing for the next two stages is accessorizing and staging and landscaping, and I don't want to have to fight this house or the pergola to see those shapes and to work with those shapes. It's a really fast, easy fix. We're going to go back into 2D, go to the top of our grid, left click on Hide and Unhide, and in the very top option you're going to see House and Custom Shapes. If you click on House, you're going to hide your house, and if you click on Custom Shape, you're going to hide your custom shape, and Pergola is going to hide your pergola. So that's going to kind of get some of your structures out of the way so you can work with your planter beds, you can work with all of your accessories like your furniture, and you can kind of move around the space a little bit and see everything really easily. That's a great time to use the hide and unhide. So now I think I'm going to put some azaleas in the planter behind the spa. And I know where azaleas are. Azaleas are categorized as shrubs. So I'm going to go over to the shrubs category in my library, and I noticed there are 224 different shrubs. So I'm going to look at my subcategories. And again, I know that azaleas are accents. So I'm going to click on accents, and there are all of my azaleas. I am going to choose the azalea indica pink. You can choose whichever one you like. I always double check that my auto elevation is on. So literally I'm glancing over and looking at my auto elevation. It's on. That way I know that these azaleas are going to go to the right elevation sitting on top of that planter. So I'm going to left click on the flower. Then I'm going to go down to the insert multiple, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to insert these symbols and make that little planter bed nice and full. I overlap my symbols just a little bit just to make sure that it's nice and full and there's no big gaps or dirt showing. And then remember the last one that I don't need, I'm going to right click, and that's going to get rid of it. I also like a shrub in a category just under the azalea category. So if you scroll down, you're going to see English lavender. Now those are larger shrubs. Sometimes it's hard to tell by the picture. You kind of have to insert them and judge it by the scale of the symbol, or go into 3D and see what the scale is. But I think it's a good choice. I've used it before. Let's left click on English lavender and again insert multiple. And I'm going to put one over here with this tree and with this one and this one. So I'm inserting a few of these. And then I'm going to right click when I'm finished. You can put whichever shrub in that you like. I want to take a look at that in 3D. So there are my azaleas and my English lavender shrubs, my trees. I still might want to do a little tweaking. I might have to double click and move some things around. Just kind of pan over and assess what you think about the position of your plants and trees and use your gizmo to adjust them. Now there is a feature that might come in handy for some of your plants and trees. When you place them on a slope, you have an option to align them to the slope, which is what I'm going to do with these English lavenders. So the way that you align shapes to the slope, whether it's plants or rocks or ground cover, you select one of them, kind of zoom out a little bit. I think I'll close my library too so you can really see this a little bit better. I'm going to double click to select one of them because I don't want to do one at a time. I want to do all of them at the same time. My trees are fine. I like the way that my trees are positioned relative to the slope. But I want to align these English lavenders to the slope. So I'm going to double click on one, and then over in my panel menu, in my object modification options toward the middle of the panel menu, you're going to see an option that says matching. And if you left click on that, it's going to select all like objects. So now all of my English lavenders are selected, and I can align all of them to the slope at the same time. Now this is in a section that we haven't worked with yet. Down towards the bottom of your panel menu, all the way, it's actually the last section you can go to, all the way down at the bottom, you have an align section. And the aligning function that we're looking for is the to slope option. I'm going to click on to slope, and that's going to slightly change the position of those shrubs and align them to the slope. Now, to clear my cursor from having selected all of these at the same time, I'm going to go to the top of my screen and left click on the circle with the line through it. So we're finished with plants and trees. I'm going to go back into 2D. I'm going to save my work, and I'm going to go to the next stage, and that's going to take me to stage 13, yard accessories.